Hi, and welcome to the third town hall meeting in Amherst. I'm your host, Swami Suryana Lawrence, and this is the guy going to be sheriff. I'm saying going. You're
I
going to be
appreciate that. Yeah.
Sheriff Jack Hall, everyone. Thank you. Give it a round of applause for me. Now let's just. How you doing, by the way?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing? And actually, if we make this a third annual, that's a good thing because that means we won.
One, yeah.
So-
I'm just preparing for the future.
I know you are. So yeah.
I'm a man that thinks ahead.
Right.
Whew. How was your day, by the way?
Day's been going pretty good, getting everything ready for this tonight, coming out, getting the topics prepared, what we could possibly be talking about, what you're going to hit me with, and we'll see what happens.
Oh, gotcha. All right. Let me just hit you with something simple.
Sure.
So you're running for sheriff.
I am running for sheriff, yeah.
What does a sheriff do?
Well, what the sheriff does, and especially in a lot of the urban areas, people don't understand what the sheriff does. And the primary responsibilities, the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county. Lorain County is the 9th largest county by population and the 4th largest county by land and water size in the state of Ohio. So it's a pretty large responsibility here. But with that being the chief law enforcement officer, the sheriff is also the fiduciary officer of the Common Pleas Court for Lorain County, meaning that we execute all writs, warrants, and orders that the Common Pleas Court judges would issue. We also have to make sure that we secure the courthouse during any times of any type of trial going on, the actual security of people coming in, dealing with the clerk's office and the judges. And then in addition to that, an enormous responsibility is overseeing the Lorain County Jail, which is currently a 422-bed facility that has been in a crumbling decline over the last few years due to lack of maintenance and that. And if it weren't for the dedicated men and women that work in corrections and the staff there, it probably wouldn't be able to serve the citizens as well as it does now. They've done a heck of a job keeping up a poorly maintained facility in the best shape that they possibly can.
That was a lot more complicated than like stopping guys from tying ladies to railroad tracks.
Yeah,
that's what I thought the job was. I'm like, that's what that guy does.
Back in the 30s when they used to have the black and white films, that's what the sheriff did.
Mustache.
Right?
So
exactly.
Across the county, law enforcement agencies are having trouble hiring people, keeping them there.
Yeah.
Cleveland has a bad problem doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you plan to stop that? How do you plan to get people come in and to stay?
Well, Swami, the first thing we have to do is that we have to make the Lorain County Sheriff's Office a destination department. And what I mean by destination department is that it's an agency that people want to come and work to, an agency that people look at the administration, the supervisory staff and say, that's an agency that I want to be a part of. A lot of times over the years, the sheriff's office has been kind of like a training stepping stone. And in regards to that is that we hire people, they come in, they work a few years, and next thing you know, they accumulate that knowledge and they move on to another department that's going to pay them more. Now, currently right now, the agency is one of the better contracts than what it used to be years ago. But I know that my opponent has actually made a comment in regards to, it actually did this in front of the Lorain County Deputies Association of their candidates thing, that said that the deputies would not be the highest paid law enforcement officers in the county. Now, a lot of that, Swami, is based on what the contractual bargaining agreement says and what their salary will be and what they're getting paid. What a lot of deputies and corrections officers has brought to our attention is that they said they wanted to be a merit-based system, that they want to be promoted, they want to be paid based on what their knowledge, their skills, and their abilities are to do the job. So on top of that, there are certain things that we can offer outside the collective bargaining agreement, such as somebody goes to a field training school and gets certified in that. There's money that we can add on top of that while they're working in the field training capacity. In addition to that, somebody who is the overall training coordinator, which is very important because I'm sure you'll probably ask me about lawsuits coming up. But when we look at lawsuits that face the sheriff's office right now, one of the common denominators in all of the lawsuits is a failure to train action. Now, this is an old legalese, a case called Canton v. Harris from many years ago, which the United States Supreme Court has held government agencies and police departments liable when they don't train their people well enough. So therefore, we have to make that a very important part of this. And then when we look at other incentives, such as if you're a canine handler, if you're a special victims investigator that handles sex crimes, things with human trafficking, we have to look at all of those specialties. And by the time you add them on top of each other, we can pay the people who want to do the work additionally for those skills that they have. And we don't have to be the lowest paid law enforcement agency. And when other officers in other areas see what we're doing at the Lorain County Sheriff's Office, they say, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a member of that organization, and I want to do those things. And that's what creates us to become a destination police and law enforcement agency.
Yeah, I like what you said about that. Wanting to work.
Exactly.
You give them an incentive, and they want to be there. They want to help.
Right.
They want to do this thing. You give them all these opportunities. That's great to hear, actually.
Well, we've heard things too from deputies who have worked. They come to the department and they retire from someplace else. And again, they've been told, as I discussed in a meeting not too long ago, that, hey, this is going to be a good retirement job. Well, you can't retire from another organization, come into Lorain County Sheriff's Office and expect it to be a retirement job. So we've got 320,000 residents that we have to serve. And we want to make sure that we're serving them in the best capacity we can. And it's not a retirement job. It's a primary responsibility to all the citizens of the county to make sure that we're servicing them the best way we can.
No, just let's be clear about retirement job. When you say retirement, just for people who don't know that,
Right.
like when you say retirement job, you're not saying that as a good thing, really, right? Or
what I'm saying is
Is
that people are being recruited to the Lorain County Sheriff's Office and being told by people in the administration of the Sheriff's Office that come on out because you've already retired from your first full-time job. This is a good Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 retirement job. The criminals work, of course, past 4 o'clock. They work before 8 o'clock in the morning. Crime's 24/7. We have to make sure that we have people that are hungry and want to get out there and do these investigations and do the job. And the fact is that if you're looking at this position as something of ending your primary career and coming and working for us, we're not hiring you because you ended your primary career. We're hiring you because we want to extend your primary career and what you've done and bring that into the sheriff's office.
That's great. That's great to hear. Yeah, I don't want a police officer, someone working like, I can half-ass it. I can just
exactly
half-ass it, not. So that's great to hear. But on a serious note, recently a Euclid police officer he got killed on the job, unfortunately. And we all know the risk. We know it's anything can happen any day. What do you plan to have to keep these men and women safe on the streets? And
well, again, we have to go back to training, number one. We have to go back to number two to make sure that the supervisors who are working for the sheriff's office are keeping an eye out on their employees. And what I mean by keeping an eye out on their employees or the direct reports, there's sometimes something may be affecting you at home. Maybe you're going through a very tough situation, a very tough personal situation. And if you come into work, especially in law enforcement, losing focus on what it is that you have to watch what's behind you, watch what's around you and in front of you, you have to make sure that we have caring supervisors that are looking at those deputies and making sure that they're focused and making sure that something at home isn't interfering with whatever it is that they're viewing that day. The second thing is that with the sheriff's office, we have the county SWAT team with the Lorain County Sheriff's Office. A lot of times what we see in some of the situations recently that have resulted in line of duty deaths is that we have basic patrol officers, basic patrol deputies executing high risk entries, high risk warrants for wanted fugitives, for example. And in that, we have to make a decision through something that we call a threat matrix, that we say, okay, if we have all of these certain things in place that create a specific danger to the officer, well, then one or two officers shouldn't be executing that warrant. We should have the SWAT team executing that warrant. And a lot of times too, over the course of the last several years, is that we've seen officers go from, when you said somebody being tied, to the railroad tracks and, the guy with the, mustache and all that. We remember the old police officer with the very formal uniform, the pants and everything else.
Twirling the,
exactly. And so a lot of times, a lot of people look at the state highway patrol, uniform, the gray shirt, the pants and everything else, all the creases in there, you could flip a quarter off of that. And now even when you look at the highway patrol, we're all wearing tactical vests now because we have less officers doing the same amount of work in a dangerous environment. And with that, we're expected to do more. But when we have a situation that creates an unusually high risk of harm to an officer or the public, that's where we have to categorically and systematically look at an objective set of standards that says, hey, if we meet this threshold, SWAT is going to execute this warrant. We're not going to put patrol officers and deputies in situations where we're going to execute that. We want to make sure that our officers are properly trained, they're safe, and they're going home to their families at night.
Okay, that's great to hear. I have a family in law enforcement, and I would love to see that for them.
Make sure
you know?
that they come home every
Yeah,
day safe.
make sure they come home. I can see them Christmas and other holidays. Um, so you talked about keeping them safe physically, and you kind of tapped into this next question. But what about their mind? Like how their mindset? What are you going to do for their mindset? Like what's your plan to keeping their mental health good? In a good spot.
Well, primarily from a mental health perspective, we have to look at the first line supervisors, which is normally a sergeant who handles those situations with being directly responsible for the deputies, the officers, corrections officers that are in there. We have to open up that training from a mental health perspective so that the first line supervisor and the sergeant looks at their family every day, their brothers and sisters that they're working with, and making sure that, and I go back to, hey, is something going on at home? And a lot of times, we in law enforcement, we have like this machismo thing that, hey, we're okay. And, we don't need to have this touchy feely stuff that I don't need to go see a psychologist. I don't need to go see a shrink.
Yeah, that's for wussies. We all know that, right?
Exactly. Right.
No,
so anyways, with that in mind, we have to take a look at that and say that it takes more courage and strength to be able to admit, that something is going on either outside the workplace or at home and be able to handle that and make sure that we're appropriately training our supervisors in a proper way. So they're identifying that and focusing on the fact of getting their direct reports help. And then, of course, then it's our responsibility to look at the sergeants and the other supervisors to make sure they're okay.
Okay.
Because they're shouldering that burden as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So anyways, with that in mind, making sure that everybody's safe, what's going on and handling that situation, we want to make sure that the supervisors are appropriately trained. So, and they handle that.
Thank you for that question. That answer. Just to say, we're here at the third annual? No,
not annual.
That's in the future.
Yep, third town hall
meeting at Moosehead in Amherst.
Moosehead Barbecue Grill in Amherst,
yes.
right on 58 between the Turnpike and Middle Ridge Road.
So yeah, so basically, but a lot of people run for sheriff. Plenty of people have. Some will have similar qualifications as you. What makes you the answer for for Lorain County? What do you bring to this table?
Well, a lot of times people want to tout their experience, that they've been in law enforcement. And sometimes just for the fact that somebody's been on the job for 30 plus years, they gain this experience. We have to look at a diversity of experience that is brought to this job. And we look at the diversity experience. I started my career off in a very small police department, Sheffield, which at that time, we were lucky to have two cops on, at midnight shift, one person to cover north, one person to cover south, and we had the entire village. Now they have several officers, that work there because it's grown exponentially due to the growth and everything else that's happened over the course of the last several years. So in regards to that is that we look at these situations that happen. And so you start with a small police department. I then went to Avon Lake and was in patrol work there. In addition to that, became the detective supervisor in Avon Lake. And then I competed for the position and got it in Cleveland Metro Parks, which was the captain of special operations. Now with that, the Cleveland Metro Parks is the largest regional law enforcement agency in the state of Ohio, encompassing 5 counties around Cleveland, all of those different areas, the different neighborhoods, and the different districts from Lake Erie going all the way down to Hinckley. So there's an extreme diverse neighborhood system that takes place now, from Tremont going up to the lake, going to Collinwood, all those different areas. So when you look at the multitude, like Lorain is the international city, we look at the Cleveland Metro Parks as being the international melting pot of all these different cultures that have come together. With that, that's given us the opportunity to work on several major cases. I was also involved in the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and the United States Secret Service Electronic Crimes Task Force. With that, we were able to do 2 major cases in regards to fighting exploitation of children online, being involved in internet pornography. The worst case, and we go back to, and this reminds me of the question that you asked, is how do we deal with these issues? Because we had one, I had to see a therapist for a few months on. We executed a search warrant on a house in Lakewood. And back in those days, there was no like fiber, network connectivity or all this. This was what they called a DSL telephone line. So we're monitoring this and we see all this huge amount of data, which is coming over this system. And so then we got what was called a Title III warrant. We started live intercepting what this was coming out of this house. It was child pornography movies coming out of the house. We didn't take the investigation far enough. So we execute the search warrant on the house. We enter it, and all of the child pornography movies that we were intercepting, as we enter the house and we're clearing it, we're going into the bedrooms. Every bedroom in the house was a soundstage for all of these movies that were being distributed out of this house. So the kids that were being sexually exploited in the house were actually in the rooms of where we executed the search warrant. The problem was the kids were not there. We missed it. We should have taken that investigation further. We should have done surveillance on the house and found when they were bringing these kids and when they were not. And this was before when human trafficking became a major issue, which became to everybody's attention, in popular culture today. And also, put out on like shows like the FBI and Law and Order SVU.
Movies now.
Exactly. And so that wasn't something back then that we were thinking of. But I think I can speak for every investigator that hit that house. When we went in, especially the ones who saw the videos that were being intercepted, were like the kids were there and we missed it. And then what made it even worse is that we took the headshots and all that from all the kids that we recovered off these child pornographic movies. And we went to the Cleveland school teachers. We went to the guidance counselors. We went to Lakewood. We went to the private schools. Swami, not one teacher and not one guidance counselor could identify any of those kids in those videos, which then tells us they were probably brought into Cleveland from someplace else. So then we had that. And then one of the big successes we had is that when we worked with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, we had an operation called the Walter Gould Travel Agency that we did. And we set up a fake child website that we said that for a certain amount of money, you come to Cleveland. And we had many of my detectives age regressed back to 12, 13, 14 years old. And people would pay to think that they were having sex with one of my detectives that was age regressed back to a teenager. And we arrested them. We ended up arresting 17 in that sting, 2 of them being pediatricians from Germany that took the nonstop flight from London into Cleveland. And we arrested them at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. So when we talk about experience, we have to make sure that we understand how we're working with federal agencies, state agencies, and even simple things like breaking into cars. A lot of people, like here in Amherst, we're here at the Moosehead today, but we're here in a community that is pretty much a bedroom community. Bedroom community residents are concerned about their homes being broken into, their cars being broken into. So we did an investigation in Cleveland Metro Parks that involved several cars being broken into around the greater Cleveland area. That turned into a multi-jurisdictional investigation, which involved the State Department of Taxation, the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, multiple police departments. Medina County was involved in that. And we ended up tracing that back to a fence, which was at East 72nd in St. Clair in Cleveland. And then also multiple locations that we tracked through LoJack that, for electronics that we would like place in people's cars to be tempted for somebody to steal. So that day we executed 13 search warrants simultaneously. And 2 people that were at the focus of this investigation, one of them was on federal parole and ended up going back for 10 years because he was one of the masterminds behind this theft operation. So you have to have somebody, especially in the sheriff's position, that can work with a multitude of different agencies, that has experience at the state level, the federal level, and somebody that has the experience that can coordinate all this. It's not just your years on the job. It's your years into actually being able to coordinate this, to be inclusive, and to be able to work all this out and get everybody to work together.
I was heavy. First off, I would like to thank you for just hearing traffic, child trafficking, all that stuff. We don't hear about that till recently, right? And I just can say thank you for even just because that's hard. That's hard to deal with and mentally. That's why I'm just worried about you guys' mental health. I've read books on detectives talking about that. And it's not pleasant. It isn't. And
not.
Thank God we have guys like you out there to do the work that I couldn't do. I couldn't do that. I couldn't, I'll lose it. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
You're quite qualified, I think. I think you could kind of do this job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, you could catch a bad guy on a road trip.
We'll get out there occasionally, and
But so people feel like the media is just out to get law enforcement all the time. They think they're always looking at law enforcement bad. They always catch them on the bad. They catch the bad apples a lot of the times, and they'll only show that,
Right.
or they won't get their facts straight.
Yeah. When you have the investigative team reports.
Yeah, and they're like, hey, this one guy did this,
Yeah.
but the whole,
But the sewer
county's
department
good,
sleeps in their trucks too, so we don't focus on that enough.
What's your plan on like combating how the media portrays law enforcement?
Well, the biggest thing is that the reason why the media looks at police a lot is because there's a friction between the law enforcement and the media. And right now, especially Lorain County, it's big news as well too. And it's not just law enforcement. It's coming from the prosecutor's office. It's coming from other things that we make public records requests for certain information, which the public is entitled to know what's going on in their government. And so then therefore, when we get involved in a particular investigation, and now finally law enforcement's coming around. And so when the news makes a request for that body camera video, that body camera video under very specific state and federal court cases stated that that is in the operation of the officer doing their job. So therefore, the in-car camera, the body camera, the radio traffic, the 911 call, everything that's happening while law enforcement is responding to that call, it's all public record. Everything is, other than somebody's social security number, that's read out. We can redact things like that. So there's redactions that come into place. But the problem is, over the years, we have law enforcement have said, no, you're not getting that. You're not entitled to it. So what we want to do is that we're going to bring the media in. It's almost like, if you remember from the old Top Gun movie, where Maverick's like telling Goose, he's like, well, what are you doing? I'm going to bring him in closer to me, and then I'm going to get up and get behind him. So anyways, we want to bring the media into the sheriff's office, and that way too, if we're releasing the press releases, if we're going right up on the stage and taking the responsibility for what it is that we're asking about, we have all the media there. We can answer all their questions right now. To give you a perfect example, this is what happens. Say we have a situation that happens either in the jail or on the road. And of course, the news media finds out about it and they say, hey, I want to make a request for the video, that the officer was wearing or whatever. We get the video. And currently what happens right now, a lot of times we just ship it off to the news.
Yeah.
And they get the video with no narrative behind it whatsoever. All right. I've got a bunch of corrections officers and deputies that there's a story behind that video. Of course there is, because we reacted to what was going on. So therefore, in order to put the deputies and the corrections officers in the best light, we have to take that incident and we have to be with the media to explain exactly what it is that's going on. Because Swami, if we don't explain it, the news media then will go out on any corner of any neighborhood and they'll find 10 people that will want to explain that story from their viewpoint. Mm-hmm. The problem is from law enforcement is that we don't take the opportunity to get our viewpoint out there. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes you initially look at a video, you initially look at something and you're like, oh my God, that looks horrific.
Yeah.
But then if you can explain to the media and you can say step A, step B, step C, this is what happened that led up to this, people have a lot better understanding in regards to how that incident unfolded and what our response was to that incident. Mm-hmm. And especially a lot of times too, we see these videos that have been on Channel 19, Channel 5, whatever else, and a lot of focus has been on our jail lately. And so therefore, they'll take a certain clip out of a video and they'll splash that on the 6 o'clock news, the 11 o'clock news, and it looks like a horrific incident that had happened because we have one view of what's happened. We have to sit down with our officers and do a thorough investigation, even though that this call is being made for videos, et cetera, public records requests. And we have to make sure that we work with our staff to say, how do we explain this situation? Now, if there's no other way to explain it, we take the responsibility for it, but that's me that has to take the responsibility for it. Of course, the officers and all that will deal with it, but I haven't seen our current sheriff on the news at all in the last few years to be able to take responsibility for a video or to explain anything that's happened either on the road or in the jail. And so that buck stops with the sheriff, and we have to take the responsibility and explain that to the media and be able to have that relationship. It shouldn't be up to the officers getting scrutiny in the public and doing all this for what happened in there. That's my job to do that. It's their job to take the praise for the great job that they did. It's my job to take the negative comments and figure out how we're going to fix this and make it better as we move on. So we bring the media in, and we're not going to shut them out.
That's a crazy word you just said in politics. Responsibility. Taking responsibility. Whew.
Right.
I think a lot of people would just,
Be happy that somebody's
happy
stepping up.
someone
And,
stepped
right.
in, like, hey, I messed up.
Right. Exactly.
And
But it's my office. We messed up. I'm the one that messed up. We'll deal with the officers and all that. But the questions that we have now, they want certain video. They want to see the disciplinary reports. They want to see. Look, a lot of times we haven't had the ability to fully grasp what the entire situation is, and we're getting these requests from the media. And so, therefore, if we keep telling the media at this time, we'll have this update for you, at this time, we'll have this update for you, we can work through that. We can work through it with the officers too, but the responsibility ends here.
that's great to hear. You're a crazy man for saying that, but you're crazy. Ugh. Oh man. Let's just lighten it up a little bit. One of my favorite topics.
Oh boy.
What does that mean? No, but guns. I
Uh-huh.
love them. We love them. People love them, but they're usually brought up in bad light. Not the best of light. Let's say
Mhm.
that. Okay. How do you feel about the guns in general and the Second Amendment? And should people have the right to protect themselves? with
Well,
guns?
if you've seen the last two, town hall meetings before tonight here at the Moosehead,
Mm.
we talk about that I'm a very constitutional sheriff. So, of course, the Second Amendment is a very crucial part, even though it's the shortest sentence in the United States Constitution. It's an important part of it. And so when we look at that, and when we look at America's right, you said to using a gun to protect yourself,
Mhm.
that is actually rooted in the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution and not the second. The second is the right for us to have arms in the first place. But you raise a very important question because there were two major Supreme Court cases. One came out of Washington, D.C., and that was called a Heller case, which stated that somebody had the right to use a firearm to protect themselves. But the problem was, when that case in D.C. was decided, it only affected the people of Washington, D.C. There was another major case up in New York State, and this went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and it was the New York State Gun and Pistol Association versus Bruin. Bruin was this guy who was like the police commissioner type guy deciding on who gets permits to carry a firearm in New York State. So therefore, they sued because it was very arbitrary. It depended on who you knew. Did you donate to a certain politician's, campaign? Who got a permit to carry a gun? So when the United States Supreme Court came back in the Bruin decision, they said, look, we're going to go back to the origins of the 14th Amendment, which was right after the Civil War, in which it was stated by a New York representative that the Southern representatives were stating that we did not want Black Americans to possess firearms when they came out of the Civil War.
Yeah.
Once everybody came out of the Civil War, they were keeping their weapons and all this, and we had Southern representatives stating we didn't want Black Americans to be armed. So the representative in New York, who was a Republican, stated that the Black American has a right to carry a firearm underneath the Second Amendment, and then the 14th extends the ability for them to protect themselves and their family. So kind of when you look at this is, and you look at the history up until the Bruin decision happened a few years ago, I guess the question could be, was only Black Americans permitted to carry firearms to protect themselves? But the New York decision in Bruin made the decision that that 14th Amendment decision applied to everybody across the United States. And in addition to that, the following decision said is that no state and no local government can make a law that contradicts what the founding fathers would have believed the Second Amendment meant all the way back in the late 1780s when it was actually created. So therefore, I'm a staunch believer in the Second Amendment, protection of the rights. However, I'm also a staunch believer in gun safety. And what I mean by gun safety is that we have too many incidences that take place across this country in the state of Ohio and Lorain County in which we have careless operation of firearms. And we have careless operation of firearms. We have a 3-year-old that grabs a gun and accidentally shoots a 2-year-old with it. We have a situation that apparently is a firearm out on a dresser. The child takes it to school. We have to instill in the ideology of our parents, the safety of our children, that those guns need to be secured. So children that don't have a knowledge of how to use that firearm are not using it in a way that they accidentally shoot a sibling, somebody in the neighborhood, take the gun to school. And we have to make sure that we instill appropriate training to make sure that our residents know that, they have to employ proper gun safety techniques.
All right. What do you start off with that? How do you?
You start off by that as number one. Okay, if I'm going to stand behind the Second Amendment and say that, we have to put our money where our mouth is. We have talked to several gun ranges around Lorain County over the course of the last year and a half. So far, every single one that we've talked to has agreed to do this. 4 times a year, we're going to post on the sheriff's office website that any resident in Lorain County that wants to bring their firearm down to a range, we will have our certified firearms range instructors that are law enforcement. We have certified range instructors from the National Rifle Association that have agreed to do this. Because a lot of times I talk to people, they say, well, I bought a gun. It's like, all right, well, have you ever shot it? Swami, I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody say, I bought a gun, but I haven't even taken it to a range yet. So you're going to use this firearm for protection at home. You've never shot it. You've never loaded it. You don't know how it operates, and you don't know what to do with it. So therefore, we want to create this with every range in Lorain County 4 times a year that any resident can come out for free. They bring their own ammo, and you'll get 60 minutes with a qualified range instructor. And then more importantly, afterwards, you go meet with the people on how to properly secure and clean that firearm too, after you're done with it on the range. But it has to start with appropriate education. And a lot of times we'll have gun laws go into effect to try to minimize everything that we're doing. And so far to date, we haven't seen in this country any gun law that's tried to minimize, firearm usage actually work. But what we have seen work recently in a University of Maryland study, which is shown in Baltimore, is that by employing firearm education, that has actually reduced the rate of a firearm being used improperly.
That's great. And you said free, right? Free lessons.
It'll be
for
free to every
people.
resident. Yeah.
See, and that's an important thing. I think a lot of people go like, oh, well, I have to pay for this and learn.
Well, they'll have to bring their ammo, but they'll have the opportunity to do that.
They have the opportunity to learn that. Government. A lot of people think government's like ineffective. The budget everywhere, it's just a hot mess.
Right.
What can you do about that? You know what I mean? Like,
well, the basic thing is that you have to look at the current budget. And I've talked about this ad nauseum, that we look at the current budget, what the current sheriff has done, and the arguments going on with the county commissioner. So it doesn't matter if your county commissioners are an opposing political party or the same political party. You have to work with the commissioners on a regular basis because they hold the purse strings to be able to do that. In addition to that, you have to be responsible for the budget and what's going on. And we'll take an example right now, our current Lorain County jail. Okay, air conditioning. So people may think, what's the big deal with air conditioning? Well, the big deal with air conditioning is when you have a 93-degree day outside, and you've got a bunch of ticked off prisoners inside the jail, that makes the job for the corrections officers inside very difficult to do. Air conditioning is very important. Here's the thing. Have you had an air conditioner ever break in your car or, any place that they break down.
Break all the time, yeah.
Everything in a facility will break. And so therefore we have to account for this. We have to budget for this. And what we've seen in the past is that we haven't seen any appropriate budgeting for in case something breaks. So for certain critical things like the safety, the locks in the building, we had a gate at the Lorain County Jail not too long ago for several months. This is the security gate that when you drive the cruiser up and you're a prisoner there, it was broken and stuck in the open position along with the garage doors to the jail for months. All right.
That's not something you want to hear.
No, not at all. But as a matter of fact, you could have driven an ice cream truck, through the booking of the Lorain County Jail, waved at the corrections officers and gone right through.
I'm sure the inmates would have liked that.
I'm sure they would. Yeah, especially if the air conditioning was broken, right?
I didn't even put that on my book.
Right. So anyways, that's broken. The air conditioning's broken. There's maintenance that has to be done of these buildings because it also comes down to is one of the primary responsibilities. Your first question is what the sheriff is supposed to do. Mm-hmm. We're responsible for 422 inmates inside of that building, but more importantly, we're more responsible for the men and women that protect us and those people inside that building. And we got to make sure that simple things, garage doors that are supposed to work, gates, air conditioning, that we plan for it being maintained, that we plan for it being replaced, and that we promote safety of everybody working inside that jail.
I like what you're saying about, helping the guys keep the inmates in. I had a
roommate. Want to keep the inmates in.
Yeah, the correctional officers. And I had a roommate actually that worked
at the county jail.
At the county jail. Not this one, but another one.
Well, What was your room at the county? Your roommate? You were in the county jail? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe. No. I'm not. I'm not a bad person. I'm a very good tax. No, my roommate actually worked there, and he would
Okay.
come home, and he would come home, and he would just yeah, I had to detain a guy, and I had to mace him, and just dead face. I'm like, these guys don't get any like. No one goes like, thank God for these guys.
Right.
He's like, I had to wrestle this guy, and he peed on me or something. It's
Right.
like, that is so thankless. Like no one thanks these guys. They have to do a lot.
Well,
So
no, they thank them 1 week a year.
Yeah.
National Corrections Week, and it's got to expand way beyond that because we have to thank.
because it's an important job. So yeah,
It's an unbelievably important
And
job.
I wouldn't, air conditioning. I wouldn't want hot pee on me. Like really, that would be horrible.
Exactly. That would be horrible.
Just trying to lighten the mood, guys. Because before this, hotspots. I wrote hotspots for this, but like these are like parts of town. Like everyone knows, like don't go to these parts. Like you go there,
The high crime area.
you roll up your windows, you lock your door,
Right.
you don't stop for anyone, even if it looks like a grandmother. It's
Right.
like she needs help, screw her,
Right.
pass her. Right? We all know these things. I've been raised in one of these areas. I have family members like that. What are you gonna do to respond to these like hotspots, these places that everyone knows, like they feel they're never gonna
Well,
change.
first of all, we have to look at what a hotspot or a high crime neighborhood is.
Mhm.
Okay, so if you look at a high crime neighborhood, technically, I live in a high crime neighborhood. We've had somebody down the street that they've had multiple domestic violence calls. Okay, that's happened. I had a neighbor on the other end of the street have a flamethrower. I had a neighbor 2 streets over that they actually moved in. They were renting a house. They set a car on fire, 2 streets over, and there was an aggravated burglary that happened in that house. So if you look at the 131 houses in my neighborhood and the felonies that have happened, okay, I would be considered statistically a high crime neighborhood.
Mm.
So a lot of times high crime neighborhoods aren't defined by their statistics. They're defined by their socioeconomic and their cultural makeup. And so when we look at this, we have to look at the community, and every community that's defined as a high crime neighborhood will tell you we're over policed. The cops are here all the time. They're making these stops that are ridiculous because, my son actually, we would get into arguments about this over dinner when he would say, hey, somebody didn't signal on their bicycle that they were turning in the roadway. I stopped them, pulled a gun off of them, and, 2 grams of crack. Okay, well, good traffic stop, but come on, let's look at the reason why we stopped them in the first place.
Mhm.
So that's a gun and 2 grams of crack. Versus that if you talk to the people that actually live in these neighborhoods, everybody knows who's selling guns out of the house. Everybody knows who the drug dealers are. If you simply work with the community and you don't over police on the small stuff, but you work up to the big cases, you'll actually get 100 guns off the street. You'll get kilos of heroin off the street if you have the community working with you. So a hotspot or a high crime neighborhood shouldn't be defined on how you look. It shouldn't be defined on what your background is, and it shouldn't be defined on what your religion or anything else is.
Mhm.
It should be defined by the relationship that law enforcement has with that neighborhood and how we're going to affect appropriate policing there.
Okay, yeah, that's a great answer. I don't know
Well,
what to
thank
say.
you very much.
And yeah, that's a very near and dear spot to me because coming to America as an immigrant and stuff, you're not the richest, right? So you go where you can live,
Yeah.
and those are not the nicest places. And like growing up, we had to be in there. We just had to like take care of ourselves. My dad was fortunate to open a bird shop, animal thing, and he had to fight off people all the time. He's actually had to kill a person because they tried to rob him.
At the
And-
bird shop.
At the bird shop.
Okay.
And he killed them by using the birds. He just
Right. That's what I
They
didn't know if there was
picked
some
him up and-
falcon involved or eagle in this or
picked him
something.
up,
But
dropped
all right.
him. No, it didn't do that. But wouldn't that be way cooler?
It'd be a much better story.
But
than what we're
that'd
gonna-
be a much better story.
Right.
Well, the better story is that he didn't have to do that. So, no, it's great to see you help the community because you can. Everyone, we would know the people like don't go over that. You can't hang out with this guy's kid. His dad is selling drugs. Don't do this, that.
Right.
And if a couple, instead of just pulling people over for busted tails, like you
Right.
said, and a lot of the times, it's just a guy who's just trying to make by. He's working some dead end job. He just trying to feed his family and kids.
Or working 3 dead-end jobs.
Yeah,
trying to feed
and
his
he
family
can't
and
afford
kids.
this
Right.
light because he needs to pay the rent. He needs to keep this.
Exactly.
To keep the kid in the something football or
Yeah.
something,
And
and he gets pulled over for that.
right. And one of the things that we had talked about before too, and when you really bring all the community together, is that if you're going to stop somebody for a burned out license plate light, a muffler, or whatever else, we have an amazing joint vocational school here in Lorain County.
Yeah, I talked to you about that.
Yeah,
before.
and we also have a school resource officer at that joint vocational school. Why don't we then take the burned out taillights, the mufflers, and everything else, and we take it to the kids at the JVS so they can actually work on that through partnerships with, particular auto shop places and that could assist JVS in doing this. The person who's working 3 jobs that couldn't get the muffler fixed, now they may be able to get the muffler fixed for free, muffler fixed at low cost at JVS. The kids learn, through their vocation that they're doing this. And here's the beautiful part. The correction order that they got, instead of getting the ticket, the school resource officer deputy is already there at JVS. They sign off on it. The corrections order has been corrected. And we've had kids learn. We've had no major fine go out to somebody that can't afford it. And we also create a relationship with the school, law enforcement, and the community that we didn't have before.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear.
So we do that too.
Okay, yeah, that's a nice job.
Thank you.
It's about community.
Yeah.
Law enforcement is here to protect and be part of the community.
Exactly.
They're not here just to rule.
No, not.
They're
not at
serving.
all.
You're
Right.
serving.
Right.
That's great to hear.
Do we have a question on the?
You do?
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, let's go to the crowd. Go ahead. Speak.
All right. This came in online. What are the changes you guys, sorry. What changes are you going to do for the staff at the jail to make it a better place to work?
Wow, that's a tough question. Changes at the jail for the staff to make it a better place to work. Well, number one is that we have to make it a place to work that somebody wants to come to in the first place. And by having a facility that was built in 77 and then rebuilt in 97, and it's fallen apart, that doesn't make it a good place to want to come to work. And it's dismal to have to go to work there. And again, when we have no air conditioning, when we don't have doors at work, when we don't have locks to work, we have things there that are so old that the companies don't exist in business anymore to be able to fix it. And if that's the case, and the corrections officers know this, that they could be trapped in a volatile situation because we have a lock on the door that nobody knows how to fix, that we could have replaced with something else. Even though the facility is crumbling now, we have to maintain it. We have to make it the best we can. We have to make it an environment that is not only safe for the people that we're housing in there, but we have to make it more safe, and we have to make it appealing to the people who have to protect those inmates that we're housing in there. So first of all, maintenance is a huge issue that we have to take care of. And we also have to listen. A lot of people are like, well, we'll have a labor management meeting. Somebody's griping about something or whatever else. It's like, hey, the jail is a pretty serious place that we have to make sure. The 2 most dangerous places in the county are the jail and the courthouse. So the jail is where we're housing everybody up for violent offenses. And then imagine anybody that's gone through a divorce or anything else, you go to the courthouse, especially the domestic relations floor. Those are floor 2 and floor 4 over at the Lorain County Courthouse are 2 of the most dangerous places in Lorain County with the jail. And those have to be maintained in the capacity and make sure that everybody's safe. If all those corrections officers know that they're going home safe at night, know that we care about them, that we treat them like a family, and make sure that we maintain everything that's going on, we're going to make people happy and want them to come back into work.
All right, great. Thank you. How do you plan to bridge the gap between road patrol and corrections?
Wow. Bridging the gap between road patrol and corrections. Well, they're actually 2 distinct separate jobs. I almost want to hear like a Law and Order. Don't, the
I
police
could do it
this.
for you. Dum-dum.
There you go. They have 2 very distinct responsibilities. The biggest issue is that road patrol gets to work with fun tools, firearms, tasers, mace and everything else. When you're looking at the jail, you're looking at a situation in which there is an extreme high emotional intelligence, which has to be incorporated when you're a corrections officer. You have this to protect yourself and to be able to get yourself out of situations while you're in the jail. In addition to that, I think road needs to have a better understanding of what goes on in the jail, not just dumping people off. And I'm not saying that that's our deputies that are doing that. We have to train our local police departments in regards to fingerprinting prisoners, how we get people into the jail, what are the appropriate standards for getting somebody housed in a correctional facility, and looking at that. So road patrol has to understand that, but not just deputies. I'm talking local police department road patrols have to do that. Then in addition to that, we have to go to the corrections officers and say, what is it that you want to be trained in? What do you want to aspire to be? So for example, one of the things that we talked about with a few members of the medical staff is that we're creating this unit called the CREW, the Community Resource Unit, which is going to be utilized to respond to the most aggravating situations that need de-escalation, that involve people with developmental disabilities, mental health, or neurological disorders. We already have a staff in the jail, which has probably dealt with many of these people, several times. And so therefore, if we can take the skills, the abilities, and the knowledge of the people inside the jail and take that out into the community, we could probably work pretty well cohesively with the road patrol to be able to handle those situations, not just the deputies, but the city police departments as well. So let's take those expertise and that knowledge that the corrections officers have learned, and let's take that out into the community, and vice versa. There's things that are going on in the community with somebody that may be in that jail. Somebody in road patrol's heard about it. They got to bring that information in, because we got to make sure our COs are safe inside that facility as well.
Good avenue of communication between the two.
It has to be a great avenue of communication.
All right.
And other things too, breaking down barriers as well includes, why do we need segregated locker rooms? There seems to be a very definite division between road patrol and the corrections officers. And it's simple things like break rooms and locker rooms and things like this. We don't even share that out there. And so these are things that we have to make sure that we're interacting more together and being able to work more as a cohesive unit than two separate units.
Okay, very good. Thank you. One more question. At a previous town hall, you had mentioned about a program that would involve going into the neighborhood and kind of teaching them about the sheriff's department and what they do and programs that are available and things. How would you plan on financing that?
Oh, wow. I think you're referring to our warden program that we talked about. And the warden program will be comprised of volunteers from the community, people that have a vested interest in their community, people that care very deeply about the community. We have a lot of deputies and corrections officers that care very deeply about what happens within the sheriff's office. We mirror those community members to be able to be disciples of the message of the sheriff's office, to take that out into the community, and then also bring the message of the community back into the sheriff's office so we can appropriately handle and respond to that. That program would be comprised of volunteers. We would also look at some of our business community. So things like, polo shirts that they would be wearing, appropriate attire. So we have a uniform look that, we would ask some of our business partners to kick in on that as well. And my goal is to make sure that that warden program doesn't cost the general fund of Lorain County a dime. And so we do that based on people who have a strong affiliation and care for the community. And then, of course, us responding to that, too, to make sure that we provide them with the necessary resources. All right, it may cost, an email account or, something else like that, business cards that are going to be printed, but we want to make sure that they have those tools to respond appropriately to the community and at no cost to the taxpayers of Lorain County.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other question? Or?
Just one more.
Okay.
Let's go with this one because it's important to me. Jail is expensive.
Yes, it is.
I mean, it is, right? And I'm a taxpayer, and I really want to know, how can you save taxpayers money without jeopardizing my safety, our safety?
Well, one of the things that we have to look at with the jail especially is that you're right, it's expensive. And one of the most expensive things that we get into the jail is that depending on classification of prisoners, medium security, low security prisoners cost less than maximum security prisoners. One of the biggest issues that we have right now, though, is the cost of our medical care. Now, this one everybody's going to be able to understand, because I just talked to a deputy today and he said, hey, I got a 3% raise this year. But the county commissioners raised my health insurance and that went up 9%. My emergency room visit went from $25 to $200,
Mhm.
deductible for the emergency room. Okay, take that same philosophy and also apply it to the prisoners that are inside the jail when they have a medical condition. So right now what we're doing is that Lorain County uses an insurance carrier that's well known, I won't mention their name, that's in Northeastern Ohio to be able to be that intermediary, to be able to negotiate the cost. Unlike Cuyahoga County that has Metro Healthcare literally inside the Cuyahoga County Jail, their nurses, their doctors all go to that floor for any type of medical care or treatment that they need, minus, a major, trauma incident or anything else like that. The county pays for that in Cuyahoga County, and those costs are contained. We ship our people out. Okay, other than some inside care that can be done, dental care and everything, every medium and other type of procedure that has to be done goes out to a medical provider. Now, here's the thing that bothers me greatly. The Ohio Revised Code sets in the code that a provider, especially when a prisoner is in a jail, should not be charging more than what the Medicare rate is for that medical procedure that has to be done. We're getting charged way over that as county taxpayers, and we're paying that bill every single time a prisoner goes to the hospital. We have to make sure that we hold the medical provider accountable to what the law says, to make sure that we bring those medical care costs down, because the last thing I want to do is to be able to have to go to a victim of crime and say, hey, we had to let the offender out because we couldn't afford their cardiac catheterization. So they're out now. We don't want to do that. And that's part of the system right now, Swami. It's called a furlough. And a furlough is a legal action that takes place that the sheriff would go to the court and say, hey, we need to release this guy because it's too expensive to keep him in. We can't afford his medical procedure to do it. And so we have to make sure, just like all of our regular medical costs and what we're doing, when I had a deputy complain to me, 3% raise, my health care went up 9%, same thing's happening in the jail. However, all of us are paying for that, medical care. You said you had a concern as a taxpayer. Jail is expensive. I'm not going to say it's not, but there are certain things that we can do to make sure that we can get that wrapped around, the cost wrapped around, especially medical treatment is one of those things. So,
Okay. Is there one more?
I do have one more that came in online. It says, what plans, if any, would you put in place to improve courtroom security? Currently, there are no cameras in many of the common areas of the court, including the elevators, the hallways, and even the offices, to help the deputies at the jail do their job safely as well.
That's really interesting. Somebody must have followed me today because I was actually at the Lorain County Courthouse with a meeting on courthouse security. The cameras are deplorable. We don't have enough of them, number one, set up in certain areas. And we also don't have a lot of artificial intelligence analytics on those cameras. So certain things like, do we have people loitering in certain areas or people in areas that they're not supposed to be in? There's no alarm function to that. If we have a situation happen, somebody comes into the front lobby of the courthouse and there's a shooting that takes place down there. If somebody on the fourth floor didn't hear that shooting, they don't know what's going on in regards to being alarmed and locking down or crashing the building is what it's called sometimes. And so therefore we have to make sure that we can utilize many of the same cameras that we have now, but we're going to have to add additional cameras to make that safe. Elevator is a perfect example of that. Nothing like being in an enclosed, 12-foot square space and having an assault take place in an elevator and that we didn't see anything about it. So a little excitement here at the Moosehead right now, but hopefully everything's okay.
Everything seems to be okay.
Are they okay? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All good.
Okay. When you talk about locking down the courthouse, is that what we think of when you lock down a school when there's an incident? Do you put everything on lockdown, the doors lock and everything like that?
That's what a lockdown is supposed to be. But in addition to that, we have to take lockdown procedures further. Like right now, I discussed at the courthouse today. We have a visitor that's not an employee or an attorney or law enforcement that's not known. The visitor comes through the front area of the courthouse. They check in and have their belongings scanned, okay, if they have any weapons or anything else on them. And so therefore what happens is that we don't know who that person is. We don't have their name. We don't have their identity. We also never know if that person actually left the courthouse at the end of the day. So when we talk about locking down, who was in there, who's supposed to be in that building at that particular time, because the worst case scenario we have is if there's an active shooting that takes place inside that courthouse, we need to have a good idea of who was in there in the first place. Is it anybody that we have to look at as a potential suspect? Did we account for all of our potential victims? Did we account for anybody else that was in that building? And so when we talk about locking down, it just doesn't mean locking the doors, but unfortunately, that's what we do right now. A lockdown needs to be extended, and we have to take that, gather information so we make sure that everybody's safe. Everybody that's supposed to be in the building is in the building, out of the building. We make sure at the end of the day that that building is clear. So a lockdown is much more than just locking the doors.
Locking doors.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
So the question, I do have one more question.
You said last time you had one
I
last
know, I'm
question.
a liar. That's why I'm not running for sheriff.
That's
because
right.
I'm a liar.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of people think law enforcement is not held accountable. You talked about you taking accountable,
Yeah.
but how do you stop? Like, how do you hold law enforcement, your employees? How do you get them to be accountable for what their actions are?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to set a standard and expectation of what's going to happen in the sheriff's office, from simple things on how do you want reports written to what the expectation of behavior is going to be, while you're on the road. Over the course of the past several years, the public has set that expectation of what, they don't want to be over policed. They don't want to be brutalized. They don't want to be. Those are the big things that ironically are easy to solve, but we still haven't solved them today. What comes down to is that when we create these cultures inside organizations that, okay, if I can get away with this little bit, then maybe I can get away with and do this. And one of the things that's a constant issue that comes up is one person is treated this way and the other person is treated this way. And as I talked about before, things have to be done on merit. Things have to be done on how you present yourself. How do you do your job professionally? And not only does that meet the expectation, but should be the norm and recognized as positive behavior by the administration in addition to that. And so therefore, if we not only hold our officers accountable and our supervisors and administration accountable to treating the community fairly, we have to do it in addition to that. We have to treat ourselves fairly. And I don't see us doing that right now, Swami, because there's a lot of situations, especially in the current sheriff's office, it seems like the rank of sergeant is about the glass ceiling in the sheriff's office. We have to make sure that people are aspiring to be lieutenants and captains. And, of course, we'll come in, we'll have an administration that we'll set up, but we should be the last people ever brought in from outside the organization. We should be developing everybody from inside the organization and striving to make those people the best they can be. So they're the next sheriff, they're the next chief deputy, they're the next major, they're the next captain. We don't do that now. And when we don't do that and we talk about accountability, one man or woman looks at it and says, hey, he or she didn't have to do it, so I guess I don't have to do it. It's so simple that it starts just right there. And unfortunately, all those little things, if he or she doesn't have to do it, then leads up to something bigger later on. So that's how we keep accountability.
All right, great. That's great to hear. I think this is toward the end of the night. Anyone else have any more questions for my friend here, Jack Hall?
No, I think we're almost out of time. So
We're about out of time. We're out of time.
Oh, did you have one more question? Or? Okay. Oh, we had 3 minutes, she said.
Oh,
so,
3 minutes. So what do you want to talk about? Let's just.
I don't know. Let's talk about your jail experience and your roommate that you had for.
My roommate.
We can start there.
I did have a jail experience, actually. It's sort of dark. It's sad. My father, while he was passing away, he had dementia a little bit. So he told the police that I stole this car and I wouldn't give it back to him. So I was driving to work one day and they pulled me over, and then I'm like, oh, just for my seatbelt. And they're, he goes, oh, can I see your ID? He takes it back and comes back and he waits. And then there's a second car and then a third. I'm like, whoa, this is a lot of cars for a seatbelt, just unbeknownst to me. And then they come back, could you get out the car, sir? And they tell me the situation. I'm like, no, that's not true, because I'm driving my car. And they put me in jail for like 3 days. It was quite an experience.
I bet.
But everything was settled. My dad, took it back. But that was my jail experience.
All
and,
right, so you did get to serve in jail.
Yeah, I did.
All right, so I was right.
But no, you were right on that part. Like, damn, I hated that you were.
Right.
But no, my roommate, he used to come in all the time, just eyes just wide open, like, oh man, like some guy just like spit on me today, and I'm just there in my boxers playing video games. Like, oh, that's great.
No boxers in jail, though,
Yeah,
Swami. So
no, you don't want to wear boxers in jail. I found out.
exactly right.
But
Well,
I had a great time here talking to you at
I
Moosehead.
did too. Yes,
Moosehead in Amherst.
Yeah, and we want to thank the ownership and
Thanks
staff
to
of
ownership.
Moosehead Barbecue Grill
Huh?
for hosting us tonight. And again, I'm Jack Hall, looking for your vote in November of 2024 for Lorain County Sheriff. And thank all of you for coming out tonight. We really appreciate having
Thank you.
you.
I'm your host, Swami Soriano Lawrence, and see you next time at the 4th. We're going to do a 4th one,
Yes,
right? You're going to do a 4th?
That'll be in Elyria. We'll announce the date soon, but that will be at Rubens Deli on
Rubens
Leona
Deli.
Street in Elyria. So
All right.
We'll see you then.
We'll see you then. Thank you. Thank you.
very
Nice talking to
much.
you.
All right. Take care.
Have a nice night.